They didn't even look me in the eye when they fired me. Not that I was expecting streamers and a Rolex, but a little acknowledgement might have been nice. You'd think after 31 years, 3 relocations and 1 miraculous turnaround that saved their sorry company from bankruptcy, someone would have mustered the decency to at least say, "Thanks, Alan." But no. Just a cold conference room, a younger-than-my-daughter HR rep named Kelsey with an oversized Starbucks, and painfully fake empathy, and a senior VP who wouldn't shut up about restructuring for the future. Future my ass. What he really meant was, you're 61 and your gray hair makes the office look less like a startup and more like a nursing home. Let me back up. My name's Alan Grayson. I'm, or was, Director of Operations at Vantatech, a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle that sells AI-powered solutions to people who don't understand AI but have fat budgets and trust buzzwords. You know the type. Guys named Brad in Patagonia vests nodding while someone explains a dashboard that does absolutely nothing. Back in 2008, when the world was crumbling and Vantatech was 2 months away from being a ghost town, I worked 70-hour weeks for 6 months straight to keep things running. I called in every favor I had from vendors, begged old clients to stay, and even mortgaged my goddamn house to keep a crucial shipment moving. And you know what? It worked. We survived. No scratch. That we thrived. In 2009, the company doubled its revenue. I got a plaque, a cheap bottle of whiskey, and a handshake from the CEO, who later took full credit for the recovery in a Forbes article. Of course he did. But I stayed. Why? Because I believed in loyalty. I thought it meant something. Turns out, I was the only one who did. Fast forward to last Tuesday, I'd just finished a call with a logistics partner when I got the email. Quick meeting, conference room B. That's it. No subject, no context. And because I'm the kind of idiot who still believes in protocol, I showed up 5 minutes early, tie straight, notes in hand, assuming it was about our upcoming Q3 targets. Instead, I got Kelsey, Mr. VP Botox, and a printout that used phrases like performance realignment and long-term vision. I asked if I was being fired. Kelsey gave me a look like I just asked her to do calculus. "We're not calling it that, Alan," she said, like I was too feeble to understand corporate euphemisms. "This is more of a strategic evolution." "Ah," I said, "so evolution involves killing off the dinosaurs." Botox VP chuckled nervously. "It's not about age." Of course it wasn't. That's why last week they'd hired a 27-year-old with a TikTok following to optimize synergy. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I took the severance paperwork, stood up and left, but not before turning to Kelsey and saying, "You know, I built the system you used to print that termination form." She blinked, probably trying to remember where the printer even was. I walked out of that building like a ghost. 31 years, gone in a 15-minute meeting with someone whose favorite adjective was disruptive. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it might keep me tethered to reality. My house, a modest 2-story in Bellevue, felt different, stale, smaller. My wife Joanne greeted me with a hug before I even stepped into the kitchen. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though she'd warned me for months that the company was shifting, that new hires looked at me like I was a living relic. She just poured me a scotch and said, "Well, maybe it's time you finally wrote that book." Right, the book. The memoir I've been planning since 2014 and never started. About what? How to get stabbed in the back while fixing someone else's mess. Instead, I sat at my desk and stared at my monitor for hours, flicking through emails from former colleagues who hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. I wasn't angry yet. I was hollow, like someone had emptied me out and left the shell sitting upright. The anger came later. It started that weekend. Joanne and I went out for brunch, and I overheard 2 20-somethings at the next table talking about Vantatech. "She's totally revamping ops," one of them said. "Like finally someone young in the room, right?" The other laughed. "That Alan Guy was a fossil. No offense, but come on. Dude was probably still using spreadsheets. I nearly choked on my eggs Benedict. That was when it hit me. They weren't just replacing me, they were erasing me. They were rewriting the narrative, pretending I hadn't been the guy who stayed up nights fixing code, smoothing supply chains, and mentoring half of their now managerial staff. And worst of all, they were smug about it. Like they'd discovered fire, and I'd been too busy rubbing sticks together. That's when the anger crystallized into something sharper, something colder. Not revenge, not yet, but curiosity. I wanted to see how far they'd fall without me. Spoiler, it didn't take long. 3 weeks after I left, I got a call from Dave Winston, a vendor I'd worked with for over a decade. He sounded frantic. "Alan, man, what the hell is going on over there? I don't work there anymore," I said, maybe a little too gleefully. "Yeah, well, that explains a lot. They tried to change the distribution plan for Q3 and didn't even realize it clashed with customs clearance dates. It's a mess." I pretended to be surprised. "Oh no, who's handling it now?" "Some girl named Megan. She told me she watched a YouTube video about supply logistics." I actually laughed. Out loud, in my kitchen. Alone. That night, I opened a new notebook and titled the first page, Operation Jurassic Payback. I didn't know what the plan was yet, but I knew I wasn't going to just fade into the sepia-toned sunset of retirement while some underqualified clowns dismantled the system I built. No. If they thought I was too old to matter, they were about to find out just how dangerous experience could be. Let me give you a little context about the system I designed. It wasn't just supply chain algorithms or CRM workflows. It was everything. The glue, the connective tissue between departments that made Vantatech run smoothly. Finance trusted it. Sales relied on it. Operations was it. And you know what happens when you pull out the guy who knows where all the wires are? You start tripping. 1 week after Dave's call, I got an anonymous tip from someone still inside, an old friend in accounting. Apparently, the new head of ops had attempted to migrate our custom ERP system to a flashy cloud-based platform to modernize operations. The problem, they didn't back up the original. The moment I heard that, my palms itched. You see, when I built the original architecture, I'd designed a failsafe, not out of paranoia, but because I'd seen what happened when executives tried to play tech roulette. It wasn't malicious. It was preventive. Unless someone authenticated with my credentials, the migration would trigger a cascade of redundant loops. In plain English, everything would look like it was working until it wasn't. Invoices would vanish, purchase orders would loop. Inventory would show numbers that didn't exist, and you couldn't fix it without the key. The key that only I had. I hadn't built it to sabotage. Back then, I trusted them, but now, now the idea of a little chaos didn't seem so unreasonable. Don't look at me like that. I wasn't planning anything yet. I was just watching, listening. I created a fake LinkedIn account, young guy, MBA from Stanford, lots of keywords. Started connecting with Vantatech employees. You'd be amazed at what people post when they think you're a fellow thought leader. Turns out morale was tanking. The new VP had promised radical transparency, but forgot that transparency works both ways. They were bleeding talent. A third of the operations team had quit in 2 weeks. Still, I hadn't made a move. Not really. But then I saw her post, Kelsey. She had the audacity to write, "Restructuring is never easy, but letting go of outdated systems and people is essential for growth. Thrilled to be part of the next chapter at Vantatech." Outdated systems and people. That was the moment. That was when curiosity became vengeance, not loud, not violent, but surgical and poetic. The thing about systems is they don't forget. People do. They move on, they get promoted, they leave, but the system, it just keeps running cold and indifferent. And if you designed it, if you built the structure, if you were the system, well, that's when it starts to remember you. I'd been watching the slow-motion train wreck that was Vantatech for a couple of weeks now. After Kelsey's post, her little tweet about letting go of outdated systems and people, I knew it was time to take action. Not in some grand, explosive way. No, I wasn't some amateur. I'd been around long enough to know that revenge, real revenge, is a quiet thing. It's a whisper in the right ear, a nudge in the right direction. You don't need a sledgehammer when you have a scalpel. I still had my old login credentials. They were probably the only thing left in that company with any real value. I hadn't been locked out. At first, I didn't want to risk it. A small part of me still felt the pang of loyalty, but after the things I'd seen, after the audacity of their attempts to replace me, I started to realize they needed me. I didn't need them. So one night when the house was quiet, when Joanne was watching some true crime documentary, probably because it made her feel better about the mess she'd married into, I sat down at my old desktop, a relic from my Vantatech days, and I logged in. The first thing I noticed, they hadn't even changed my password. The same one I'd used for years, the same one I'd typed in 1,000 times, all the way back to the days when we were just scrappy tech developers, trying to stay afloat. I was inside. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic at first. I just wanted to see how badly they were fumbling, how far they had let things slip without me. I checked the inventory system. Sure enough, the numbers were wrong. Some products were marked as out of stock, but there were 5,000 units sitting in a warehouse that hadn't been logged in for months. There were discrepancies in the pricing. $100,000 worth of orders had been lost in the shuffle, buried under layers of software updates they clearly didn't understand. But that was just the surface, the deeper stuff, the stuff I'd put in place to prevent mistakes. Like these, the backups, the redundancies, gone. Like I said, systems don't forget. And this one remembered me all too well. I didn't go to work the next day, didn't need to. I didn't need to show up and try to explain to Kelsey or anyone else how they were messing everything up. I'd already seen what they were doing. I'd already made my plans. The problem with running a tech company without someone who actually understands how the tech works, well, it's like trying to drive a car with no steering wheel. It might go straight for a while, but eventually you're going to hit something. And when that something hits back, it doesn't matter how many younger, prettier faces you have in the room. It doesn't matter how many disruptive ideas you throw at the wall. I started with the basic stuff. I knew that if I moved too quickly, someone would notice. The system was built to be subtle, and subtlety was key. I didn't want them to catch on immediately. So I started small. I tampered with the logistics department's routing system. Just a couple of shipments, delayed by an hour or two. Nothing catastrophic, just a little hiccup. Let's see how they handle it. The next day, I got a call from Peter, one of the senior supply chain managers who had been there longer than most of the management team. He was confused. "Alan, is this your doing? There are issues with the routing for shipments to our West Coast clients. They're all delayed by a few hours." I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a rush of something I hadn't in a while. Control. "No, Peter. I'm retired. I don't even know what you're talking about." Peter didn't question it. He just sighed, a long exhale that told me everything I needed to know about how the new team was handling things. They weren't. That was just the beginning. I kept moving the pieces. I knew exactly where to strike, because I knew exactly how. Their infrastructure worked. I knew the software, the dependencies, the entire tech stack. So when I pushed a little button here and there, things started to fall apart. Meanwhile, Kelsey kept posting her motivational nonsense on LinkedIn. "Great leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being effective," she wrote in one post. The irony was enough to make me laugh out loud. Being liked? Yeah, sure. You'll be liked when your entire client base is wondering where their orders went, when your tech is so outdated you can't even log into your own CRM system anymore. I didn't hear from Kelsey directly. Instead, I heard from the other side of the equation, the vendors. They were starting to get frustrated. Payments were late, orders were messed up, people were nervous. There was panic in the air, but it wasn't mine to fix. I wasn't there to save them this time. This was their mess to clean up. A week later, I got a message from my old friend Dave. This time, he wasn't frantic. He was pissed. You know what, Alan? I've been around long enough to know when a company is dead in the water and Vantatech's sinking faster than the Titanic. People are talking about jumping ship. Really? I replied, feigning innocence. What's the issue? Come on, Alan, Dave scoffed. Don't play coy with me. They're screwing up orders like it's a competition. They've lost a bunch of clients in the past week. Your replacements? They don't know their asses. From a hole in the ground, I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. There was no rush anymore. I wasn't just getting revenge. I was witnessing a slow collapse, a beautiful unraveling of the empire they thought they'd built. They were drowning without even knowing it, but I had a job to do. I wasn't done, yet I still had to make sure that when they realized what was happening, it would be too late. And that's when I pulled the trigger. One late night, when the office was dark and I knew no one would be watching the system, I uploaded a file into their central server. It was a simple thing, just a tiny bug, almost invisible, but that was the beauty of it. No one would notice right away. The system would keep working, as it always had, just a little slower, a little more inefficient, and then one day it would all crash. It was the kind of disaster you couldn't undo, the kind of mistake you couldn't explain away. I didn't care about the consequences. By the time they figured it out, the damage would be done. The clients they were losing, the investors getting cold feet, that wasn't my problem. That was the price of arrogance. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing, a series of texts from Joanne asking if I'd seen the news. Vantatech in crisis, major supply chain, issues, client orders delayed, investors losing faith. I smiled to myself. It was happening, just as I'd planned. Kelsey's post the night before had been predictably tone-deaf. We're navigating some challenges, but we're committed to growth and transparency. Oh, she had no idea what was coming next, but the real fun began when I received an email from an anonymous account. It was a screenshot, a small piece of evidence that would blow their carefully constructed narrative to pieces. The email contained a picture of an internal memo from Kelsey herself, sent the previous day. The subject line, "The New Era." The memo, Kelsey bragged about implementing a next-gen cloud solution that would revolutionize the company's operations. But buried in the email was a glaring error. The client data wasn't encrypted properly. It was all exposed. All of it. Every single private document, every order, every contract. A goldmine for anyone who wanted to ruin them. And then at the bottom, a little note from Kelsey to the IT team. Let's keep this under wraps for now. We don't want the shareholders to panic. Oh, I wanted them to panic. Badly. I sat back, in my chair, watching it all unfold. The moment of reckoning was getting closer. They wouldn't see it coming. Not until it was too late. I didn't need to lift a finger anymore. The system, the company, was already collapsing under its own weight, and I, Alan Grayson, was the architect of its fall. It's funny how everything you've built can fall apart so quickly. One day, you're at the top of the world. The next, you're sitting in your living room, staring at your phone and waiting for the inevitable collapse to happen. I've seen it all. People, systems, companies. They all come crashing down eventually. It's just a matter of timing. And my timing? Perfect. It all started with that email, the one I'd received from the anonymous account, the memo Kelsey had sent to the IT team. It was the perfect leverage. In fact, it was so clean, so precise, that it almost felt too easy. But maybe that's the point. People like Kelsey never expect someone like me to know how to play the game. I spent the next few days watching from the sidelines, letting the storm brew without interfering directly. There was a certain pleasure in just observing, watching them scramble as the first wave of problems hit. The supply chain was in chaos, orders were delayed, clients were furious. Their so-called cutting-edge cloud system, completely unreliable. But all that was just noise. The real bomb was ticking underneath the surface, and Kelsey didn't even realize it yet. She kept posting on LinkedIn, trying to spin her narrative. "We're evolving. We're learning from our mistakes," she would say. "Growth is a journey, and we're on the right path." The irony made me chuckle every time. I could see it in her eyes when I ran into her at the office one last time. She was starting to feel the pressure. She didn't know where to look, who to blame. But then, there it was, a glimmer of realization. I could see her trying to piece it all together. She knew things weren't right. She knew she was being lied to, but she had no idea who had done it. I remember the day I received the phone call. It was a Friday afternoon. I'd been lounging on my couch, sipping a whiskey, feeling more at ease than I had in months. When my phone buzzed, I wasn't expecting much. Probably another angry vendor or client calling to yell at me for the mess they were in. But it wasn't. It was Dave. "Alan," he said, his voice tight, "you need to see this." "See what?" I asked, not even pretending to care. "Look at the news. Something's wrong, real wrong." I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my phone and opened the browser, and there it was, in bold letters. Vantatech CEO resigns amid scandal. I had to suppress a grin. Kelsey had finally done it. She'd managed to take the whole ship down on her own, but she didn't know how deep the hole had gotten. She had no idea that the mess she was dealing with was just the beginning. I read through the article quickly, noting how they spun her. Resignation as a difficult but necessary decision for the future of the company. That was a lie. The truth was that Kelsey had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar, and not just the cookie jar. She'd been trying to cover her tracks, and she didn't even know who had put the bullet in the chamber. Over the next few days, the pressure on the company mounted. Investors were pulling out, clients were cancelling contracts. The media started to pick up on the discrepancies in their financial records, the missing data, the faulty cloud infrastructure, the security breach. People were finally starting to ask the right questions, but what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I'd planted the seeds for all of it. The memos, the financial errors, the tampered logistics systems. I had a hand in every single mistake they made. And Kelsey? She was the one who was going to take the fall for it all. By the time the board decided to call an emergency meeting, I was already 2 steps ahead. I'd been gathering information, watching everything unfold, and I knew exactly what they would do next. The company would need a scapegoat, and there was only one person who could fill that role. Kelsey. The meeting was a spectacle. The room was packed with executives, lawyers, and reporters, all trying to figure out how they'd gotten to this point. I watched the live stream from the comfort of my home. Kelsey looked out of place, her eyes darting around as she tried to maintain some semblance of control. But it was clear she knew her time was up. The chair of the board, a man named Richard, stood up and made the announcement. "We have no choice," he said gravely. "In light of recent events and the financial mismanagement that has come to light, we have decided to part ways with CEO Kelsey Adams." I could hear the gasp from the audience, even through the screen. Kelsey's face went white. She looked like she was about to argue, but then she realized something. There was no way out. The trap had been set, and she was the one caught in it. Richard continued, "We will conduct a full investigation into the matter, but for now, we must move forward and restore confidence in the company. This is the only way to protect Vantatech's future. I wasn't the least bit surprised when Kelsey left the room without a word. She didn't even try to fight it. She knew she was done, and I was the one who had ensured that. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Kelsey's resignation was just the beginning. Soon after, the board brought in an interim CEO to stabilize the company. A safe choice, someone who didn't have any ties to the mess Kelsey had made. But that wasn't going to solve anything. The damage had already been done. The company was too far gone. They could replace Kelsey, but they couldn't replace me. In the weeks that followed, I stayed quiet. I watched as Vantatech continued its downward spiral. They tried to salvage what they could, but it was too late. The contracts that had been lost, the clients that had left, the employees who jumped ship, those things couldn't be fixed with a new CEO. I knew that better than anyone, and then came the moment I'd been waiting for. It was one last piece of the puzzle that would seal the deal. I'd been quietly working behind the scenes, making sure that everything was in place. I had a meeting scheduled with the company's largest remaining investor, an old acquaintance of mine who didn't know I was the one responsible for the chaos that had erupted at Vantatech. I walked into the investor's office, smooth and confident, like I hadn't just brought an entire empire to its knees. The investor, a man named Gary, was sitting behind a polished desk, his fingers drumming lightly as he waited for me to speak. "Gary," I said with a smile, "I'm sure you've heard about the mess over at Vantatech." Gary grimaced. "Yeah, it's been a nightmare. I've been keeping an eye on things," I said, leaning forward, "and I think I can help you understand just how bad it's going to get." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You see," I said, "the company's financial troubles, they're only the beginning. There's something much bigger at play here, and if you don't act quickly, you'll be left holding the bag." Gary sat up straighter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the board doesn't have the full picture. They don't know what's really going on, but I do, and I can give you everything you need to make sure you come out ahead when this thing completely implodes." I slid a file across the desk, one that contained everything Gary needed to know. The financial discrepancies, the security breaches, the internal memos that had been leaked. It was all there, a goldmine of information that would destroy Vantatech for good. Gary looked down at the file, his expression darkening as he flipped through the documents. "You're a bastard," he muttered, but I could see the wheels turning. In his head, he knew this was his ticket out. He wasn't about to let Kelsey or the board ruin his investment. "I'm not the one who caused this mess," I said coolly, "but I'm the one who can help you fix it." Gary nodded slowly. "All right, let's do this." By the time I left his office, I knew the deal was sealed. Vantatech would collapse completely. The investors would pull out, the clients would disappear, and Kelsey would be left holding the broken pieces. She'd be remembered as the CEO who tried to save a sinking ship, but ultimately it was the people who had worked behind the scenes, who really pulled the strings, and me, I'd be long gone by the time the final crash came. I'd done my job, I'd taken what was mine, and as for the rest of it, well, they'd have to live with the wreckage they created.